So anyway, Dr. Parti, I'll call you Rajiv, okay? Actually, you know, his actual spiritual name is Michael. So maybe I'll call him Michael, okay? We'll explain that later. Could you tell us, Michael, when you were born, give us a little history, how you got involved with medicine and so forth.
Yeah, I was born in New Delhi, India, about 65 years ago to a middle-class family. And when I was young, around 18, I got spiritually involved in an organization. And then I was wondering, what is life? And to serve the poor, I almost became a monk that I chose medicine. I was on the path to become an architect, but because of the spiritual inclination, I chose to become a doctor. And I migrated to America about 42 years ago.
And how long have you been, we're director of anesthesiology in Bakersfield?
I was the director of anesthesiology for 30 years.
20 years.
30 years, 30.
20?
30.
30 years. Wow. Can you imagine, people? 30 years. He was telling me the other day, we were talking, I told him the most money I ever made as a minister, $65,000 a year. He said, and he figured out what it was per month. Said, what you would make per year is what I made per month. And so he's willing to completely drop that, right? Because Spirit has directed him to do this work.
Yeah, you know, like I say, previously, in my previous life, I used to put people to sleep, but now I wake them up.
Yeah. Okay, now tell us briefly about your, well, not briefly, but give us a sense of what happened to you, what led up to this NDE that you had, this near-death experience, because it's so profound to affect this change in your life.
Yeah, in 2008, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So I had a surgery, radical prostatectomy, and that left me with complications like impotency and incontinence. So in 2010, 2 years later, the doctors at UCLA implanted a special device so I could control my bladder. It's not an artificial sphincter. But unfortunately, it got infected. So I had a fever of 105. So I was rushed from Bakersfield to UCLA, Los Angeles, University of California, Los Angeles, emergency surgery. And I was septic. You know, sepsis is when the blood pressure drops and there's high mortality. So only way it is to take the device out because it becomes a source of infection. And during surgery, my blood pressure dropped and my heart stopped because I was so sick. And then my consciousness separated from my body and I went to the different realms. First, I saw myself near the ceiling and observing the surgery taking place. I could hear the surgeons talk and I could even hear the anesthesiologist tell a joke, which I can't repeat it here, but I remembered it. And I could smell also the pungent smell from the surgery. And from there, I went to different realms. First, I would like to say I went to heaven, but no, I went to a hellish realm where I was very petrified, very scared. And then I was praying for saving. And my father, who was, died 30 years ago, showed up. But he looked much younger. And he led me like a little child to a tunnel. And there I realized that my father really loved me. Because when I was growing up, I had an abusive relationship with him. He used to beat me up. He was very angry at me for any transgressions I had any poor grades. I had to be a perfect son, the elder son. So he asked for forgiveness and I forgave him. But the beauty is, I understood that time where he came from. In today's language, he was suffering from PTSD because he was product of partition of India. He was 18 years old when India and Pakistan separated. There was mass murder on both sides, genocide. And my family is from Pakistan, the Muslim part, and they had to run to India lying among dead bodies, like my father did, to hide himself. So he suffered from the stress and his education was cut short. So he wanted to make sure that I succeed in my life. He was living his life through me. So once I understood this, I was able to forgive him. But the beauty is I asked forgiveness from him also for my anger at him, for any transgressions at him, for any cursing him. And then I had peace. And from there, I went through a tunnel. And in the tunnel, I had review of my present life, good and bad. It was like a 3D movie playing, how I was good to people, especially my patients, how I was bad to my patients. Because for me, patients were a means of making money. And I was not kind to my patients, though I was technically very good. And that's how I became the chief of anesthesia. And there, in the tunnel, I also had a review of my past lives. One of the past life, I was a cruel prince. And during that time, I used to have a pain in my right wrist. And in the past life, I asked forgiveness from the farmers who I was beating. And incidentally, after they forgave me, once I woke up, my right wrist pain was gone. And people ask me, how can you go back and ask forgiveness? Because in that run, time is not linear. We talk about linear time, but time is not linear. Then from there, from the tunnel, I was met by two angels. And I didn't know, I know they were angels, but as a Hindu, they introduced me as Michael and Raphael. And Michael is the angel of strength, and Raphael is the angel of healing. And they made total sense to me. And when I told my wife about this, she said, what happened to the thousands of Indian god and goddesses? None of them showed up. So that's the fact. And from there, they guided me towards the light. And the light was like 1,000 suns at the same time, but it was not hurting. And in the presence of the light, I felt the presence of Jesus. And the Jesus said, your work is not done. You have to go back and you will be a healer, a spiritual healer. And he gave me the spiritual name Michael. So when I came back, I even went to a traditional church and got baptized in the ocean with the name Michael in between. So I took a middle name, Raj Michael Parti. So once I woke up, I was a different person. The Raj who went to anesthesia for surgery and the Raj who woke up was a different man. I call it Raj 1.0, and the one who woke up was Raj 2.0. I was
awesome. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was very materialistic before. For me, succeeding was very important. I lived in a 10,000 square foot house, had a Hummer and had a BMW, and my wife had a Jaguar. So I was living the high life. But then I sold my Hummer once I woke up. My life, and I bought a hybrid, literally and figuratively went from Hummer to hybrid. And I learned certain truths. And those truths you mentioned right now, one of the truths I learned was we all are connected to each other. We are all made of love. So when we are loving other people, we are loving ourselves. And then I realized that there are past lives, like I experienced in my past life. And the soul is eternal, never dies. And soul, the consciousness, can live outside the body.
And then also, Doctor, I'm going to call you Michael now. Michael, yeah. Michael, you also forgave your wife and your son, right? What happened to that after your NDE? You also asked for their forgiveness, right?
Yeah, after NDE. Before my NDE, I was kind of like my father towards my eldest son. I was pushing him to be a doctor, and he did not want to be a doctor. But I forced him to go to medical school. He dropped medical school. He failed a few times. And I used to get very angry at him. You idiot, you do a good for nothing, like what my father told me. But I was not physically abusive to him. But after my ND, I was a changed man. He was told to quit medical school because he had failed so many times. But this time, I was patient. I was kind to him, and I let him become what he wanted to be. He chose to be a computer engineer. Now he's an IT project manager in San Francisco, and he's very happy. So I was not angry at him this time and let him be punished. But I've asked for forgiveness of him, like my father asked me, for what I had treated him so badly. And he forgave me, and now we have a very cordial relationship.
And also your wife.
And then talking about my wife, Fast forward 5-10 years ago, I was busy promoting my book, which I wrote about my near-death experience, dying to wake up, giving lectures, and was neglecting my wife. And she had an affair with my best friend. I had a choice to walk away or to forgive her. She asked for forgiveness. And I chose to forgive. If I had not had an NDE, my marriage would have ended. And that was 5 years ago. And the beauty is, the net result is I've been married for 35 years, and that marriage is the best 5 years we have had. It's beautiful right now. We travel everywhere. We are soulmates now. And then for my transgressions, what I contributed for this to happen, I asked for forgiveness for her, for not loving her, not taking care of her needs. And because one of the things when you have to forgive somebody, you have to change your perspective and realize the role you played in it. And that's why I forgave my wife and asked for forgiveness to her. It's a two-way street.
So have you experienced healings as a result of forgiving yourself?
Yeah, I used to be very angry at myself because in 99, 2000, if you remember, there was the internet bubble. And I quit my job as a doctor to start making day trading. And I made millions, I lost millions in a day. And because I quit anesthesia at that time, because what I was making as a doctor for a year, I used to lose or make in a day. I said, that's the way of getting rich. But then I lost everything, even borrowed money and lost it. I went back to medicine and paid the debts off. But that left me with a lot of resentment, a lot of anger. Why was I so stupid? Why was I so angry? But then I forgave myself and started practicing self-compassion. Forgiveness and self-compassion go hand in hand. Then I was able to let go and my healing happened. I was taking pain medicines because I had wrist problem, but I was overtaking them. And that was healed from my near-death experience and of letting go and having self-compassion.
And then you also, since then, I was reading that you've been the instrument of, there have been healings now that you work with people who have experienced healings. So how do you, these healings that are occurring through you, do you attribute it to what you've learned through the near-death experience, or what is it that has allowed you to be an instrument of healing?
By experiencing the essential truths I told you, I learned how to practice them, the consciousness-based medicine, which I was guided by angels, and it's still unfolding. But I've helped people, especially with heartbreaks that time, because my heart was broken and how I healed. And people who had problems, like one couple, they were fighting when the accident happened, and when they met again in the last life, they were always fighting. But when they were able to resolve under hypnosis that issue, the marriage improved. Otherwise, they were almost close to divorce.
Fantastic. Michael, I wanted to also mention something that you and I have been talking this week about doing this presentation. And what came to me was a question: why is it difficult to ask for forgiveness? I asked that question a few days ago because it's not always difficult, but sometimes it is difficult. And so I kept asking this question: why is it difficult to ask for forgiveness? And it really wasn't until this morning that came to me, unworthiness. The word unworthiness came to me. I know that in my counseling work and also my wife's counseling work, we found that the single one thing that we find working in counseling with people is the sense of not liking oneself. I don't like myself. It's what we hear most, the sense of unworthiness. We've all experienced hurtful insults in our lives. It's like bullets shot at us, like daggers, bullets shot at us from parents, from peers, from strangers. So what are we to do with these thoughts and feelings of unworthiness? Are we actually unworthy, or are we actually worthy? And so I'll answer that question with another question. Are you a human being having a human experience, or are you spirit having a human experience? If you feel that you are a human being having a human experience, then sometimes you might feel unworthy, and other times worthy, mostly unworthy. However, if you know that you are spirit, having a human experience, then you are bulletproof, because spirit is bulletproof. And so are you, because you're spirit. You're always worthy, because you are always spirit. You are always spirit having a human experience. For example, in the book of John, Jesus said to a group of people, I and the Father are one. And some people in the crowd picked up stones and were ready to kill him. This is from the 10th chapter of John. Jesus said to them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? And they said, we are not stoning you for any good work, but for blasphemy, because you, who are a man, declare yourself to be God. And then Jesus replied, is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods, or ye are gods? That's from the 82nd Psalm. And then Jesus said, if he called them gods to whom the word of God came, the scripture cannot be broken. End of passage. Like Bob Dylan wrote in a song, everybody must get stoned. Well, I say no, we don't have to get stoned. You can be bulletproof from any and all feelings, any and all ignorant beliefs that you are unworthy. As spirit, you are always worthy. You shall know that truth, that you are always worthy, and that truth will set you free from all feelings of unworthiness. What do you say, Rod? What do you say, Michael?
I fully agree with you. Like we are worthy and we are spirit, and we are, like they say, we are human beings we are spirit in the guise of a human being. And one of the things I talk about, as I mentioned before, how to forgive is to come from the level of spirit. When you identify yourself with the spirit through meditation, prayer, and you realize your spirit, it's very easy to let go and forgive. And one of the ways to forgive is to ask your higher self or God or divine which you are. Even Jesus asked for forgiveness to forgive other people. He asked for God. I think it says, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. So connecting with your spirit, it makes it very easy to forgive, because spirit is pure, faultless, and has love in it.
And you are spirit.
And you are spirit.
And so now we've talked a while. This is sort of like an experiment we're doing today, Michael and I. So let's open things up a little bit. And anybody would like to ask any questions about forgiveness, or make any comments about self-forgiveness or forgiving others, or even to answer the question, why is it difficult for me to ask for forgiveness? So let's open up for some discussion. Yeah, you can unmute now if you like. Don't all say it at the same time.
So I had a question. Michael,
Yes,
how do you find that you are guided by spirit? Do you hear something? What helps? How does this work for you?
When I meditate, I feel connected to the spirit, and sometimes I have visions from angels, and I feel the presence of Jesus Christ. Because after my ND, I was trying different ways, becoming Ayurveda, meditation teacher, and the path I need to choose. And then one day I had an epiphany with angels, and they told me to follow the path of Jesus, which I was told in my near-death experience. And that led me to Christianity, though I'm a Hindu by birth, and that led me to unity. That's why I'm in unity right now, because of the visions I had with the angels.
Thank you.
You can also suggest anything that you've learned about forgiveness, not to ask a question, but maybe what have you learned about forgiving yourself and loving yourself unconditionally? Maybe you can share that with everyone. Yeah.
Forgiving oneself is, I found out, the hardest forgiveness. You can forgive other people still, but forgiving for your own transgressions, like I gave you one example, and then forgiving myself for my role in what my wife did was not easy. But you have to forgive. It's not a one-time thing you say, I forgive myself, but it's a process. And you can ask for help for the higher beings or your higher self to help forgive. And forgive, you have to do it multiple times. Like in Bible, in I think Matthew, when Peter asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive somebody who does transgression? And Jesus said, not 7 times, but 77 times, which he meant infinite. So I practice forgiveness every night. As a process I go through, I forgive myself for anything I have done wrong. I forgive people who have wronged me. And the third thing I do is I ask for forgiveness from people I have wronged that day. And so I live and sleep every night with a clean slate.
Thank you, Michael. I also wanted to say about what asking for forgiveness requires humility. In 1982, during the bloodiest siege in Beirut, Lebanon, Mother Teresa persuaded Israelis and Palestinians to stop fighting so 37 children trapped in a frontline hospital could be rescued and taken out of that war zone. She made a comment about this war-torn divisions in that region. Here's what she said. She said, we need lots of love to forgive, but we need lots of humility to ask for forgiveness. She said, I want you to share the joy of loving. Reminded me that about this idea of being humble in order to ask for forgiveness. One time, Jesus, from the book of Mark, he was in a house and talking to his disciples. And he said to the disciples, what were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet because on the way, they had argued about who was the greatest among them. That's what the disciples were arguing. Jesus, sitting down, called them together and said, if anyone wants to be first, he must be last of all and the servant of all. So they talk about the idea of humility, of emptying oneself of pride, the self-importance, to be able to ask, and empty oneself of this idea of unworthiness. That's really the thing. You know, we've been hurt by people, and we need to realize that we're not this human that gets hurt. We're spirit that is invulnerable to hurt. We are spirit, and we are bulletproof. Thank you, God. Yeah. Anybody else have a comment about the sense of the strength it takes to be to forgive oneself and others? You guys have wisdom. Share it. It's not just Michael and me. You guys have wisdom too. That's what we're here for. What do you think, Kathy?
Well, I thought, I've gotten kind of involved with Al-Anon and had a, pretty traumatic breakup. And I realized that, everything in there is saying this exact same thing, to make amends and forgive. And then you write a list and you see how rough you are on yourself, and that's what it all boils down to is to be able to do it, you've got to be kinder and gentler with yourself.
Yeah.
Be able to make that forgiveness and not beat yourself up if it takes a little while, but inevitably that is the best thing you can do for yourself and others too.
Perfect.
Beautiful. That's what when me and Reverend Bill were talking about it, I quoted him these steps from Alcohol Anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the beauty things, the first is that I ask for forgiveness. I ask for power from higher God as you define it. So in my personal life, asking for strength, connecting to the Spirit has made it possible to forgive myself and others.
Yeah. Very freeing.
Very freeing. Because, forgiveness basically is giving up hope for a different past.
Yes, right.
And it's giving up anger and resentment. Like even Buddha said, holding on to resentment and anger is like holding a coal, a burning coal in your hand and throwing it at somebody. But you are burning your own hand.
Own hand. Mhm.
Or even Buddha said, holding on to resentment or anger is like drinking the poison yourself, hoping somebody else will die.
Will die. Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because holding on to resentment, I became so angry. I developed blood pressure. I started drinking, and I became obese and became pre-diabetic, from stress and from anger. But when I let go of all these things, I lost weight, my cholesterol came down, my diabetes got healed, my blood pressure, I don't have to take any blood pressure pills. So it has medical benefits also, apart from spiritual benefits.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, Michael. Let's all give a hand for Michael. Thank you, Michael.